What would you do when your 80% customer threatens to leave? Imagine this scenario. You have one customer that represents 80% of your revenue. This is fairly common in the early stages of a business. And now suddenly, out of the blue, this customer threatens you and says they're not going to continue buying from you anymore. What would you do? Then the customer, as you talk to them, demands that you do extra engineering work beyond your contract in order to keep them. Now, to make matters worse, you're raising money. A lot of problems all at once. And this is a real life scenario that one of my clients is going through right now. What would you do? Well, let's tackle this problem and let's get started. So as I said, this is a real life problem that one of my clients, Gary, is going through right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the scenarios, the possible 4 scenarios that Gary and I came up with that we had to choose from. We'll walk you through the positives, we'll walk you through the negatives, and I want you to kind of play along and think about what you would do in this situation, and then we'll tell you what we did and why we did it. So now that we've said that, let's go through the scenarios. So as I said, let's recap just a little bit here. We have a customer, 80% of our revenue, and now suddenly they've become a big problem for us. They're making crazy demands, and we have the potential of losing them, and we're raising money in the middle, and it's not going to look too good if you lose your top customer in the middle of fundraising. So again, what would you do? So here's the first of the 4 scenarios that we came up with as a possibility, and that is do exactly what the customer wants. In other words, we can do everything the customer's asking for. So what are the positives of doing this? Maybe we get to keep the customer, but maybe not. I've had that happen to me in the past. So maybe we get to keep the customer. That's the most positive thing. We get to keep the revenue, which is the most positive thing. Also helps us with our fundraising if we keep this customer. Now, what are the negatives? This one customer is sucking up all our engineering resource, literally all of it. Well, maybe 90% of it, but almost all of it they're sucking up. So we can't work on other future customers who are going to help us with our plan and with the vision that we have for the company. That's the big negative. The second is they're pushing us around, and we don't know when this is going to end. It may be one of these things where one demand comes after the next demand, comes after the next demand, and comes after the next demand. And where does it end? So maybe, the thought process is maybe we should stand up to them. But in this scenario, it's, we do what they want. But that's the problem, is that we don't know when this is going to end or if it's going to help us. So that's scenario number 1. Keep that in your back pocket. Here's scenario number 2. Let's see if we can reason with the customer. This seems like a pretty smart thing to do, don't you think? Let's go CEO to CEO, or VP to VP, or CEO to VP, or CEO to senior person, and see whether we can get them to be reasonable. Well, the positive thing here is that if we can get them talking, obviously, and we can get them to be reasonable, maybe we can save the account. And maybe we can find a way to do business with them going forward in a way that makes sense to us. That's the big positive. Also, obviously, we keep the revenue. We eliminate any issues with our fundraising. Those are the big positives. Now, the negatives of this approach, well, we don't know whether it's going to work. They've exhibited to us a lack of honesty. And when you have an issue with integrity, when you're dealing with customers, that's when you know there are going to be problems, right? It's because whenever anybody, I don't care what's a customer, an employee, an investor, isn't dealing with you on the up and up, you can't trust them anymore. And they've already exhibited to us a lack of trust. We're not sure, even if we talk to them, even if we think we're in good faith with them, that they'll do the right thing. Now, making matters worse here is our key contact, in this particular case, who was the CEO, is leaving the business. So now the CTO is gone, the new person is coming in, and this new person, the new CTO, he's the one who's causing the problems. So how do we get around this person? How do we make this person look like a hero? That would be great if we could do it. But it's challenging because he doesn't seem to see the utility, and all he seems to want to do is push us around. Now, one of the other things to add to this part of the discussion is we've looked at and we've talked to some of the other customers that this company has. And this is this company's reputation, is to do the same thing to all of their vendors. So that's scenario number 2. See if we can reason with the customer. Now let's go to scenario number 3. We could threaten the customer. Now by threaten, obviously we're not going to, threaten violence. We're not going to threaten legal action, but we can say to them, either work with us in a way that's responsible and to the contract, or we're going to walk away. We can do that. We can turn the tables on the customer. Now, the positives of working this way is it puts the control back in our hands, and it gives them a dilemma, because do they want to work with us in a fair way or not? That's the positive of this scenario. Also, the positive is if it's successful, we have a customer who's going to be reasonable going forward because now we've threatened them. And now they know that if they do this, we're going to walk. That's always the possibility. Also, our fundraising will be okay, if I haven't said that before. So that's the positives. The negatives, again, it comes back to integrity and trust. Can we truly trust this customer? Even if they say yes now, how do we know that they're not going to just change their tune yet again and cause us more problems going forward? So that's part of the challenge here. Now, let me add another nuance in here. The vision of the company isn't really aimed at customers like this going forward. This is a classic early stage customer. And a classic early stage customer sometimes doesn't exactly fit the longer term vision of the company. The longer term vision of the company doesn't rely on customers like this. It relies on other similar customers, but not exactly this type of customer. So in the long run, this customer's utility and value beyond the revenue is going to become less and less to the company. So add that into your thought process as you think about this. Now let's go to scenario number 4. We move on from the customer. In other words, we tell the customer, you know what? We appreciate what you want. It's not something we can do. And we think you should find another vendor. Thank you so much for your time. We're moving on. We're not going to accept working with you anymore going forward. Now, the positives of this puts us in complete control of the situation. We've told them no. We're moving on. And that's that. The negatives of the situation, well, they're fairly obvious. We lose 80% of our revenue. That shortens our runway. It may hurt us in our fundraising, depending upon how investors view this, and it may possibly kill the company. Those are the negatives. Those are pretty big negatives. And I don't like kill the company decisions. But it may not be avoidable. But that's the negatives of this. So now let's talk about what Gary and I did as we talked through this. Because this was a tough one, right? So when you look at these 4 possible scenarios, doing what they want, we decided pretty quickly that we couldn't do that because it was just not going to allow the company to fulfill its vision. And it was a death sentence. It was a slow death sentence. We couldn't do it. They would just keep beating us up. We'd lose engineering by doing that as well because the engineers would get pissed and frustrated. So we said no to the first one. The second 2, reasoning with the customer and threatening the customers, those look like pretty reasonable thought processes. And maybe, just maybe, if we believed that they would actually do what we wanted them to do, that, we'd be okay working with them. But we came to the conclusion that based on their behavior, based on the way that they were with us, there was no way we could trust them at all. None. It just wasn't going to happen. And this is the thing, every situation is different, but if you're ever in this type of a situation, integrity matters. And at the end of the day, Gary couldn't trust them. So that's why we came to the decision of doing number 4, moving on. And yeah, there's a huge risk here, and the risk is we're not able to raise money, but we have a couple plans for that. So in our thought process here, we recognize that we could raise a smaller angel round and be able to keep the company going for the next 12 to 18 months. So that's kind of why we chose to do it this way. And then we can raise the venture round and show people the vision because we're on the verge of getting these big customers. That's something else I probably forgot to tell you. So we have all these big major OEMs coming on to fulfill the vision. And I think the vision is so compelling for the business that we have to just say, this is our course, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And that's what Gary felt. More important than me feeling it, but that's what Gary felt also, is that the vision was the key. We have to stay true to the vision. We can't hurt the vision of the company by supporting this customer any longer. And therefore, that's why we chose number 4, is because, yes, there's an issue with raising a large round of funding right now, but we could raise a smaller round of funding to bridge the company going forward until the vision is fulfilled. When the vision shows fulfillment, that's when we're going to be able to raise large sums of money for this business and be able to grow it at a much more rapid pace. So that was why we chose number 4. It's a tough decision, don't you think, to walk away from 80% of your revenue? But you know what? Sometimes you have to be prepared to do tough things. And you have to be prepared to risk. And this is one of those decisions. I don't like kill the company decisions, and I want to avoid them at all costs. But in this particular case, when you look at the other options weren't that great, quite frankly. And yeah, you could think, well, maybe I could reason with them. And this is going to vary in your particular instance, but in this particular instance, couldn't trust them. So it left us with option number 4. Tell me what you would do. Tell me how you feel about what we chose here, what Gary chose. I'm curious as to your thoughts. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. Have a great, great day.